Stay here, she told Aduni quietly, handing the girl her phone. If anything happens to me, call the number marked Inspector. Tell her doctor, Yetunde, sent you. Then she walked outside to meet her past. You look good, Doctor, Kolapo said, his smile revealing gold-capped teeth that caught the afternoon sun like warning signals. Clean living suits you. What do you want, Kolapo? Yetunde kept her voice steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Direct as always. I appreciate that about you. He gestured toward the ramshackle buildings around them, the wooden walkways suspended over dark water, the children who peeked fearfully from behind their mothers' wrappers. Look at this place. You left the big city to play Florence Nightingale in a floating slum. Very noble, very stupid. I left that life behind. Did you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just changed neighborhoods. Kolapo's expression hardened. You think testimony and good intentions wash away blood? You think because Adewale Akintoye found Jesus in prison, all the people we killed just disappear? The words hit her like physical blows. We killed. Not they killed or he killed. We. Because despite her medical degree and her humanitarian work, despite the lives she had saved in this clinic, she was still part of that darkness. I've tried to make amends, she said quietly. Amends? Kolapo laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Tell me, Doctor, how do you make amends to Mama Ronke? How do you make amends to that boy we interrogated for 3 hours in the warehouse? What was his name again? Femi Ajibade. Yetunde felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Femi died in a gang shooting, before we ever... Did he? Kolapo's smile widened. Or did he die because you told us exactly which pressure points would cause maximum pain without permanent damage? Did he die because your medical expertise helped us extract information that led to 12 more deaths? The truth hit her like a Lagos Danfo at full speed, crushing and inescapable. She had convinced herself that Femi had died in street violence, but now she remembered the fear in that young man's eyes as she had watched Kolapo work, remembered the way he had looked at her with hope even as she remained silent. You see it now, Kolapo said softly. The weight of all those choices. They don't just disappear because you moved to the slums and started treating malaria. But I'm not here for revenge, Kolapo continued, his tone shifting to something almost conversational. I'm here with an opportunity. He gestured to one of his men, who produced a leather briefcase that looked expensive enough to feed half of Makoko for a month. The blood tide isn't like the old gangs. We're not fighting over scraps of territory or respect. We're building something bigger, a network that spans from Lagos to Accra to Kinshasa. Professional, international, clean. Clean! Yetunde couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. No more territorial wars. No more killing elders and burning down markets. We handle logistics for people who prefer not to get their hands dirty. Politicians, businessmen, generals who need certain problems to disappear quietly. He opened the briefcase, revealing neat stacks of foreign currency. Dollars, euros, pounds. More money than most Nigerians would see in a lifetime. We need someone with your skills. Someone who understands anatomy, chemistry, psychology. Someone who can make people talk without leaving marks. Who can make problems disappear without causing noise. You want me to be a torturer. I want you to be a consultant. High-end clientele, government-level clearance, diplomatic immunity when necessary. Kolapo's eyes glittered with ambition. Think bigger than Lagos, Doctor. Think continental. Yetunde stared at the money, trying to calculate how many vaccines it could buy, how many children it could feed, how many families it could lift out of poverty. The devil always knew exactly which temptations would cut deepest. And if I refuse? Kolapo's expression didn't change, but somehow the air around them grew colder. Then you'll discover that some debts compound with interest over time. The first body appeared floating in the lagoon the next morning. Baba Kehinde, the old fisherman who had taught half the children in Makoko how to mend nets and read the weather patterns on the water. He had been tortured before death, carefully, precisely, by someone who understood human anatomy. The message was clear. This is what happens when you refuse to cooperate. Yetunde Adeola stood on the jetty, staring down at the old man's body as the police boat arrived to collect what remained of another innocent life claimed by her past. Around her, the community whispered prayers and fears in equal measure. Children who had played freely in the water the day before now huddled close to their parents, sensing that their floating world had become suddenly dangerous. Doctor? Inspector Folake Adeyemi stepped off the police boat, her uniform crisp despite the early hour, her expression grim. She was one of the few honest cops left in Lagos, a woman who had survived 15 years on the force by being smarter and more ruthless than the criminals she hunted. "This is about you, isn't it?" the inspector said quietly, nodding toward the body. "Old ghosts coming to collect." Yetunde nodded, unable to trust her voice. "I've been tracking the blood tide for 6 months." Inspector Adeyemi continued. "They're different from the others. Organized, funded, connected at levels that make me very nervous. And now they're here, in my jurisdiction, targeting people under my protection." She fixed Yetunde with a stare that could have melted steel. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything you know about Kolapo Nwosu and his operation. And then we're going to stop this before more innocent people die for your sins." They sat in the clinic after hours, the setting sun casting long shadows through the small windows. Aduni had finally fallen asleep on the examination table, exhausted by fear and grief. Outside, the community was unnaturally quiet, as if the floating slum was holding its breath. "It started with good intentions," Yetunde began, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "I just wanted to heal people, to make a difference." She told Inspector Adeyemi everything. About her descent into Adewale's world, about the choices that had seemed reasonable at the time, about the night she had watched a 16-year-old boy die because she had provided the medical expertise that made his torture possible. "How many people died because of your involvement?" the inspector asked when Yetunde finally fell silent. "I don't know. 20? 50? I stopped counting after." She couldn't finish the sentence. "After what?" "After I realized I was counting them wrong. I was only counting the ones who died during operations I was directly involved in. But my medical knowledge, my insights into human psychology and physiology, they were used in planning dozens of other operations. How do you calculate causality in a network like that? How do you count the people who died because I taught someone the most effective way to inflict pain?" Inspector Adeyemi was quiet for a long time, studying Yetunde with the analytical gaze of someone who had seen every variation of human evil and human weakness. "You know what's funny?" the inspector finally said. "In all my years chasing criminals, I've learned that the most dangerous ones aren't the psychopaths who feel nothing. They're the smart ones who feel everything but convince themselves their feelings don't matter. The ones who can justify any atrocity, if they frame it as necessary for some greater good. I know what I was, Yetunde said quietly. What I am. Do you? Because sitting here listening to you, I hear someone who's spent 2 years trying to atone for sins that can't be atoned for. Someone who's convinced herself that running away from the consequences of her choices is the same as redemption. The words stung because they were true. Yetunde had come to Makoko not to serve the poor, but to escape the weight of her own guilt. She had wrapped her cowardice in the language of service, her selfishness in the rhetoric of healing. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want you to stop running, Inspector Folake Adeyemi replied. I want you to help me bring down the blood tide before they turn Lagos into their personal killing field. And I want you to accept that some debts can never be paid. But that doesn't mean you stop trying. Working with Inspector Adeyemi was different from working with Adewale's gang, but the basic mechanics of violence remained depressingly similar. Intelligence gathering, strategic planning, understanding your enemy's weaknesses, and exploiting them before they could exploit yours. The difference was in the purpose. Instead of planning how to hurt people more effectively, they were planning how to stop the hurting. Kolapos made 3 major tactical errors. Inspector Adeyemi explained, spreading surveillance photos across Yetunde's desk. First, he's operating in Makoko, which is effectively an island. Limited escape routes if we can control the water access. Second, he's using the same safe houses and supply chains that Adewale's organization used. Patterns I've been tracking for years. Third, and most importantly, he's underestimating you. How is that an error? Because he thinks you're the same person who helped torture information out of teenagers. He doesn't understand that guilt can be just as powerful a motivator as greed or fear. The inspector's smile was sharp as a blade. He's expecting Dr. Yetunde Adeola, criminal consultant. He's not prepared for Dr. Yetunde Adeola, reformed criminal who knows all his tricks. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Yetunde would appear to accept Kolapo's offer, using her access to gather intelligence about the blood tides operations, funding sources, and connections to corrupt officials. Meanwhile, Inspector Adeyemi would coordinate with federal authorities to build a comprehensive case that could dismantle the entire network. It's going to be dangerous, the inspector warned. These aren't street thugs anymore. They're professionals with resources and connections. If they suspect you're working against them, they'll kill me, Yetunde finished. Slowly, carefully, probably while live-streaming it as an example to others. Probably. Yetunde looked out the window at the floating community that had become her refuge, at the children who played in the shadows of their parents' fears, at the fishermen who still went out every morning, despite not knowing if they would return alive. 2 years ago, I chose to save my own life instead of protecting innocent people, she said quietly. Maybe it's time I tried making the opposite choice. The Blood Tide's new headquarters was a converted warehouse in Apapa, not far from the port where most of Lagos's legitimate and illegitimate imports arrived. From the outside, it looked like any other industrial building. Corrugated metal walls, small windows, a loading dock designed for trucks rather than people. Inside, it was a monument to modern criminality. Computer workstations monitored shipping schedules and police radio frequencies. A sophisticated communications array connected Lagos to criminal networks across 3 continents. The walls were lined with weapons that ranged from traditional AK-47S to cutting-edge military hardware that had no business being in civilian hands. Impressive, isn't it? Kolapo led Yetunde through the operation, like a proud father showing off his children. We process over $50 million worth of business annually. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking, political assassinations, corporate espionage. If someone needs something done quietly in West Africa, they come to us. Yetunde nodded and smiled and asked intelligent questions about logistics and security, all while memorizing faces, counting weapons, noting security procedures. Her medical training had taught her to observe details that others missed, and her criminal experience had taught her which details mattered most. But it was the basement that truly broke her heart. "Our Specialty Services Department," Kolapo announced, opening a reinforced door that led to a series of soundproofed rooms. "This is where your expertise will be most valuable." The rooms were clinical in their efficiency. Adjustable tables, medical equipment, recording devices, implements designed to cause maximum suffering with minimal risk of accidental death. In one corner, she saw a shelf lined with textbooks on anatomy, psychology, and pharmacology. Her own medical school textbooks, she realized with a sick twist of recognition. "We've had to rely on crude methods up until now," Kolapo explained. "But with your knowledge, we can offer clients much more sophisticated services. Interrogation that leaves no physical evidence. Psychological conditioning that can turn enemies into assets. Medical procedures that can eliminate problems permanently while looking like natural causes." In that moment, staring at the sophisticated torture chambers that had been built using principles she had taught years earlier, Yetunde understood the true magnitude of her sins. It wasn't just the people she had directly harmed. It was the knowledge she had shared, the techniques she had refined, the expertise that continued to cause suffering long after she had walked away. "When do we start?" she asked, her voice steady despite the horror churning in her stomach. "Tonight," Kolapo replied. "We have a federal prosecutor who's been asking uncomfortable questions about shipping manifests. She needs to understand that some questions shouldn't be asked." Inspector Folake Adeyemi. Yetunde's blood turned to ice in her veins, but she managed to keep her expression neutral. "I'll need time to prepare, to review her psychological profile, understand her weaknesses, plan the most effective approach. Of course, professional consultation. This is exactly why we need you." As they walked back upstairs, Yetunde's mind raced through possibilities, escape plans, ways to warn the inspector without revealing her true allegiances. But Kolapo had anticipated this too. "Oh, and Doctor." He smiled that gold-toothed grin that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. "Just so there's no misunderstanding about your commitment to our partnership, I've arranged for some insurance." He nodded to one of his men, who produced a tablet displaying a live video feed. The image showed Aduni, abducted and taken to an apartment she had no idea of its location, tears streaming down Yetunde's eyes. "Children are so fragile," Kolapo said conversationally. "And 8-year-old girls. Well, you know what to do. I'm sure you understand not to fall short on expectations." Yetunde understood perfectly. She was trapped just as she had been trapped 2 years ago, just as she had been trapped her entire life in a city that offered impossible choices to desperate people. But this time, she was going to choose differently. This time, she was going to choose to be the person she should have been all along.